So mostly for the case building I do, and I have quite a few videos on that, I've accumulated a small collection of beam clamps. These are the larger ones. The smaller ones that are not much more than a foot in opening I keep in a plastic storage tub, but along with spring clamps and things like that. But for these larger ones, measuring from 12 inches opening, that's jaw to jaw when fully opened, going up to 24 inches, 30 inches, and 36 inches. I have, what is it, about 10 of the 30s and only 4 of the 36s. Don't usually need that many that length. I've got 6 of the 24 inches and 8 of the 12 inches. I used to just keep them up on top of this set of shelves in a pile, which made it a mess. Every time I needed one of a particular size, they're all just tumbled in there, and sometimes they'd fall off, and decided I needed to store them in a easier to access way, and I pegged this area to do it. But I have to keep in mind I have to have room for my cutoff saw here, my bevel saw, and so I worked out that if I arranged them in this way, there would be room. I moved them out enough so they wouldn't hit the stub of the old gas line, which I've been reluctant to cut off because it's useful for hanging bandsaw blades on, and not coming out too far here, so I can still move the saw out without having these beam clamps hanging over into this area. Ones that hang out further I've got to the back or up higher, and the shorter ones in that case. So just a quick overview of the way I went about doing it. I had some scrap 3/4 inch plywood left over from making the cargo floor of my Honda Odyssey minivan, of which I have a video on. And it's just up against the side of my shelving. I have a couple carriage bolts that go through, and then with the fender washers and a nut just tied behind the vertical post of the shelf. So this piece is not actually holding the weight, it's just keeping it from sliding to the right. The thing that's actually holding the weight is I have a couple of metal angle brackets, reasonably heavy ones, just from the hardware store. So they're screwed in to the back side of the plywood, and then they hook over the edge of the shelf long enough that they cover at least 3 or so of the cross wires, and they are on top of a longitudinal wire. So those are what actually holds the weight of the whole thing, and then just to keep the whole thing from sliding off, that's what this is for. For the actual hanging of the clamps, I am using this particular brand, which may be a house brand of Ace Hardware. I don't know. I don't see this brand carried any other place, but it's not important. A lot of inexpensive beam clamps are available from a lot of makers, and this particular one has about the smallest opening here. What I ended up using was some 3/8 inch steel pipe, threaded steel pipe from the plumbing section of the hardware store. So it's 3/8 inch ID, it's more like 5/8 inch OD, and it fits in there with not a lot of extra space. Now if you lift it up, then it's got more space, but it certainly goes in there nicely, and not too tightly, not too loosely. And then I just calculated what the length needed to be. On one end I have them capped. Originally I found some plastic hole plugs that would push in there, but they wouldn't stay in, and I decided to experiment with making a plug out of wood on my lathe, and that's what I ended up using. So they're just wooden plugs that have been turned to fit, have a slight taper to them, and then they're epoxied in there. I could have just left it with open pipe. And then they're sprayed painted about 3 layers of black Rust-Oleum, and on the other end they're threaded into some 3/8 inch pipe flanges, which are screwed onto the plywood. And it's that simple, nothing else to it. So maybe somebody else will get an idea from this video on how they might store theirs.